Terrorists, who are fed by the environment of conflicts, continue their acts, spreading them across different regions. We are anxiously observing the violent actions of radical currents converging on xenophobia, cultural racism, and animosity against Islam. The most effective way of reversing this negative outlook would be to engage in a sincere cooperation here under this roof. We need to develop a new perspective to promote world peace. No crisis, no threat can possibly be resolved by leaving it to play out on its own. We all have to shoulder responsibility for a safer and more prosperous world. It is with this understanding that Turkey is pursuing an enterprising and humanitarian foreign policy. Honorable Mr. President, esteemed delegates, the Syrian conflict entered its 7th year. This conflict has created deep wounds in the country, the region, and the whole world as well. In Syria, a whole civilization is being annihilated, together with civilians and innocent children. Destroying this country and being fed by instability and oppression, terrorism now spreads like a cancer across borders. The people of Syria who took action demanding democracy, freedom, justice, and a bright future were unfortunately left alone by the international community. Turkey could not remain indifferent to this tragedy of these people, whom we see as our brothers and sisters, regardless of their origin or creed, and to whom we are connected with deep historical ties. Since the outbreak of the conflict in Syria in the spring of 2011, we have exerted every kind of humanitarian and political effort to solve the problem, and we will continue to do so. We are currently hosting more than 3 million Syrians and more than 200,000 Iraqis in our country. We have launched together with Russia and Iran the Astana meetings with the participation of all conflicting parties in an attempt to establish a permanent ceasefire and peace in the country. Following our initiatives also, the Geneva process, which was blocked for a long time, has been revived. We are putting into practice now a new plan to ensure the security of the Idlib region in Syria within the framework of the agreement reached in Astana. Turkey would be supportive of every step towards the construction of a stable and prosperous Syria, based on the territorial integrity of the country and on respect for the democratic demands of its people. Dear friends, we have taken and we will continue to take all kinds of measures for those who came to our country with the outbreak of the Syrian crisis and to stem the influx of refugees into Europe. We meet all the needs of these people, from shelter to food and clothing, from healthcare to education, at standards that are appreciated by everyone who visits our country. But I would like to underscore that we have not received sufficient support from the international community, especially from the European Union, for the efforts that we have been carrying out. The expenditures of our public institutions, of our civil society organizations and our people in order to meet the needs of those living in the camps and cities in Turkey have so far exceeded 30 billion US dollars. In turn, the European Union has sent only 820 million euros out of the 3 billion plus 3 billion euros that they in fact promised. Total assistance from the international community through the United Nations remains around $520 million. These do not come into our budget, mind you. This money goes, and they are intended for the Syrians, I should point out. They are intended for the Syrians, goes to none of this money goes into Turkey's budget. This money is given to those in need by the relief agencies through the relevant institutions of the United Nations, mind you. Before the whole world here, I here call on the countries and the international organizations which have put all the burden of the 3.2 million people on Turkey's shoulders only. I call on them to fulfill the promises they have made. In fact, Turkey is a country that carries out humanitarian aid and development assistance activities around the world. Not only do we welcome those who come to our country, but through TİKA, which is a Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, through the Disaster and Management Authority of Turkey, and through the Turkish Red Crescent and various other civil society organizations, we rush to the help of all those who are suffering and who are under oppression, regardless of which part of the world they may be. For example, through its official institutions and civil society organizations, Turkey has spent $1 billion for the reconstruction of Somalia so far. The work that we carry out and the results that we have achieved in Somalia would indeed set an example for similar efforts. According to confirmed OECD statistics, with $6 billion of humanitarian and development aid in 2016, Turkey ranked as the world's second largest donor and top contributor in terms of GNP. Yet, Turkey is the 17th largest economy of the world. Having spent 0.8% of its national income for humanitarian assistance, Turkey is one of the 6 countries that could meet the UN target. So, as you see, Turkey is working real hard towards a sustainable world, which is the main message of this General Assembly. And we will continue in the coming days with the same consideration in mind. Honorable Mr. President, esteemed delegates, Turkey is engaged in an intensive fight against the bloody terrorist organizations of the region, such as Daesh and PKK, nourished by the instability in Syria and Iraq. Additionally, our fight against the FETÖ terrorist organization, which attempted to change the legitimate and democratic regime of Turkey by a bloody coup, is also ongoing. We have recovered 243 residential areas and a land which is larger than 2,000 square kilometers, thanks to the Operation Euphrates Shield, initiated in Syria following the attacks of Daesh on our borders. We have neutralized almost 3,000 Daesh militants during that operation. Around 100,000 Syrians returned to and resettled in the region that we cleaned up from the terrorists. The Operation Euphrates Shield is the single greatest accomplishment against Daesh since its occupation of the region. I must highlight the following fact in your presence. Most of the groups and forces claiming to fight against Daesh in the region, in fact, have no such real purpose. These groups and forces use Daesh as a pretext to just realize their own agendas. The efforts by YPG to change the demographic structure in the regions it has captured, to seize the property of the people, to kill or exile the ones who stand against it, all of these things form a crime against humanity. If the fight against Daesh is not conducted on a legitimate basis, it would be unavoidable for the world to come under the threat of a new Daesh-like entity. Similar approaches exist in Iran as well. Iraq also needs the compromises to be reached on the basis of territorial integrity and the realization of the ideals to build a common future. Steps such as demands for independence that can cause new crises and conflicts in the region must be avoided. We here call on the Iraqi Kurdish regional government to abort the initiative that they have launched in that direction. Ignoring the clear and determined stance of Turkey in this matter may lead to a process that shall deprive the Iraqi Kurdish regional government even the opportunities they currently enjoy. We all should work on building tranquility, peace, security, and stability in the region instead of sparking new conflicts. Esteemed Mr. President, dear delegates, besides Syria and Iraq, we are also closely following the regions such as Libya and Yemen, where terrorist organizations are trying to establish influence. International community's support to the legitimate government in Libya shall contribute significantly to the stability of the country. It should be kept in mind that if the mistakes made in Syria and Iraq are repeated in Libya, then that will expose the whole world, particularly Europe, to much greater threats. Another issue that Turkey lays delicate emphasis on is the immediate resolution of the conflict which has erupted in the Gulf region. We believe that the sanctions negatively affecting the living conditions of the Qatari people should first of all be lifted. We support the mediation efforts of the Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah, for the resolution of the crisis. Our hope is that these efforts would yield a positive result. We also hope that Saudi Arabia, whom we see as the elder brother of the Gulf region, would show a sincere will for the resolution of this issue. Another important problem is the issue of Palestine, which we consider to be the gaping wound of the world, and by extension, the preservation of the historical status of Jerusalem and Al-Haram al-Sharif, i.e. the Temple Mount. The crisis in Al-Haram al-Sharif in July has demonstrated that the sensitivity of the issue. The continuation of the peace process there can only be possible on the condition that Israel immediately stops illegal settlement activities and takes steps towards a two-state solution. So in this context, I call on the international community to support our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Eastern Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza as they struggle for an independent and geographically unified Palestinian state. Despite the current absence of conflict, the Balkans is another potential crisis geography which still faces serious challenges. For this reason, we attach great importance to the integration of Balkan countries with the Euro-Atlantic institutions. Turkey will continue to do its part for peace, stability, and welfare to prevail in this exceptional part of the world. The territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and of Georgia is the key for regional stability in southern Caucasus. So we need to work harder for the resolution of the conflicts in Nagorno-Karabakh, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia. We should never forget that each crisis that we ignore today has the potential to spark a regional and even a global crisis tomorrow. In this framework, I would also like to underline that we are against all sorts of nuclear weapons, which have come to increasingly occupy the world agenda in recent days. It's obvious that we could not overcome such problems unless we completely cleanse the world from the scourge of nuclear weapons. We are saddened by the fact that the comprehensive negotiation process, started in 2008, has ended due to the incomprehensible stance of the Greek Cypriots. We will do our best to ensure that the natural resources discovered in the Eastern Mediterranean in recent years will serve the peace, stability, and welfare of the region. We are ready to consider proposals for a solution that respect the rights of Turkish Cypriots. Esteemed Mr. President, dear delegates, while struggling with all these global and regional problems, our world was shocked once again by the sad news that we received from Myanmar a few weeks ago. The Muslim community in the Rakhine region of Myanmar